It's a common trope to use pre-existing characters in fiction. For one thing, if everyone knows a character, you don't have to provide much backstory and can get right to the narrative. In my opinion, that's what makes writing fan fiction fun. For example, no one's going to need half a novel to get familiar with Santa Claus, at least in the Western world. You can get into it without having to pause and talk about him and chimneys. However, there are a few types of pre-existing characters. Speaking of fan fiction, we have hundreds of years of narrative art to pull characters from. You can have Harry Potter fight Godzilla or Sherlock Holmes go to Neverland. You can probably even get that second one published, considering what all is in the public domain these days. I don't think anyone's saying you can't write a story starring someone else's creations, although getting it to readers is another situation due to legal concerns. Then there are what I'll call folklore characters. Stories everyone knows that aren't tied to religions. Modern Santa Claus is a perfect example, as is Bigfoot. Sure, some people may think these characters are real, but yeah. Characters like these are also not at all controversial to use, or shouldn't be, and you can do some creative stuff with them. See Grant Morrison's Claus series, or James Tinian's Department of Truth. Then there are actual people. Write a story about a politician screwing a celebrity, and you might get sued. Even if everyone's familiar with Timothée Chalamet, a book about him being a serial killer would probably cross some legal boundaries. Should you write a story about real people, however entertaining it might be? I mean, you can, but I'd get a lawyer first. But there's a fourth type of character. These figures aren't as real as Mr. Chalamet, but they're also not as fictional as Santa Claus or Godzilla. The type of characters I'm talking about are those from religions. Are they okay to use? I had to think that through with the book I wrote, and I decided not to go down that path, but you can make up your own mind. Now, there's some pretty damn cool characters out there in religions current and past, some of which are famous due to their fictional use. The Norse god Thor has a Hollywood franchise, for example. There are relatively famous ones, like Anansi the Spider from West Africa's Akan culture, and then lesser-known gods like Sedna, the Inuit goddess of both the underworld and the sea. However, what is vital to remember is that these characters are not folklore. At one point, Greek gods like Artemis weren't historical footnotes, they were actively worshipped. If you tried writing a story about her doing something unpalatable in that era, you would get a very different response than you would today, because to many people back then, she was very, very real. Characters from religions are legally okay to use, at least in Western societies, but that doesn't mean you won't face consequences for being disrespectful. For example, please don't publish drawings of Islamic figures, and know that is not a joke. Most religious people won't actively take action against blasphemers, but ask a priest what he thinks about the show Supernatural using God as a character, and see what he says. One franchise that notoriously mines the Bible for characters is that of John Constantine and Hellblazer. People who follow this channel know that I'm a fan, but it's still messed up. However, what's worse to me is when small religions are used as the basis for fiction. Louisiana Voodoo, a religion whose nerve center is New Orleans, Louisiana, is a major victim here. There have been comics, TV shows, and movies that have straight up stolen figures from the religion for use in entertainment. If you know who Papa Legba is, that's more likely a result of watching American Horror Story and studying voodoo as a religion. Again, I have definitely consumed and enjoyed media like this, but using actual voodoo deities always rubs me the wrong way, regardless. So should writers use this type of character? It honestly comes down to how much you empathize with other people. If you care about others, trivializing characters from their religions is something you probably shouldn't do, because it does hurt people. Dogma was funny as hell to me, but to many people, it was profoundly insulting. The fact is that even if you think a religion is a joke, there are real people that take it very, very seriously. I had to think a lot about this writing a book named A Cage of Sand. I was originally thinking of using a god from an actual indigenous American religion in the story, along with the folklore character from Europe. That's not too much of a spoiler, I don't think. But instead of pulling a Neil Gaiman and just not caring who I pissed off, I ended up making up new gods. The benefits to doing that are pretty obvious. You can mold a character from the ground up and develop their mythology independent of any source material. It's yours. There's no canon you have to adhere to, and there are no behavioral traits you need to keep intact for the character to be believable as the figure you're using. Sure, you can make Zeus shoot fireballs, but that's kinda missing the point. The downside to making up your own gods is mostly that you don't get the name recognition associated with the religious figure you were going to use. An example of this is when the writers of John Constantine tried to get the okay to use the DC version of the devil, and were told that he already existed in their universe and was busy. They ended up creating a new Lord of Hell, known as the First of the Fallen, who needed to be built from the ground up. Did the story suffer? Dangerous Habits, the story I'm talking about, is the best regarded Hellblazer tale of all time. Would it have been different if the character was the devil instead of a new creation? Maybe, but the twist ending writer Garth Ennis ended up using would have been much, much harder to pull off were that the case. In fact, we probably would have gotten a completely different back half of the story. Is any of this important? I mean, again, do whatever you want. My decision with the Cage of Sand ended up being the right one, I think, because the next book in the series, The Bastard, focuses heavily on the pantheon I began building in the first book. If I had been using real indigenous American gods, it would have been hard for me to make the story work with those existing characters, and that's not even mentioning how fucked up I would have felt doing it. For me, I'll probably be sticking with my own mythologies for a while, at least for the series in question, The World Behind the World. What about you? Do you think using existing gods is okay? Have you done that yourself? If you have an opinion, let me know, and you can keep updated on my videos and projects using the link in the description. Later on.